Cool. Oh, I guess that was the go ahead. Cool. I think we're good to get going here. So, yeah, everyone, thank you very much for coming back or joining us for our third of the coaching workshop series. The first two have been really good. We had Ryan sort of talking about his philosophies as a rugby coach, particularly in respect to his love and I guess execution of coaching skill acquisition and developing players across that journey. Then we had James and Mitch Wilson last week going through some coaching of fundamental skills, which was really good. And then tonight we've got a great session on structure. So the periodization weekly training periodization that is, and constructing an effective training session. So obviously we've got James Willocks, our technical advisor from 2020, also Dartmouth's head coach up in New Hampshire, and then Jared Collinson, who's obviously our head of physical performance with the Free Jacks. So two men very well versed in the topic at hand, and looking forward to what they have to say. So Jimmy, I'll let you do a bit of an introduction on sort of your experiences with periodization and what took you to where you are now, James.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Tommy. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you all. Let me pull this up so I can see everyone here. Thanks for joining. Again, great opportunity to develop, great opportunity to learn, to expand your horizons. So thanks, Tommy, for putting this on. And Ollie, you're doing a great job behind the scenes. So thanks for that, man. I think sort of building a schedule and building a session, I sort of really started to dive and dig into this probably 5 or 6 years ago. Actually, I was very fortunate to spend some time with the Eagles when John Mitchell was coaching them. So Mitch was head coach, and Marty Veal, who's now running things down in New York. These guys introduced me to this concept of tactical periodization, which was big in football at the time. And since Mitch has taken it, Eddie Jones runs a different version, a modified version that's over with England. But so I guess what tactical periodization is, if you could simplify it, it's basically just a quest for efficiency. It's how can we tick as many boxes as we want efficiently as possible in order to prepare on a Saturday, right? And that's, again, some of you on this call are probably pretty familiar with this, and Jose Mourinho sort of popularized it in the football world, but it's sort of been modified and sort of taken on a rugby form in the last few years. So I guess that's a little bit of the how we got to where we got to type chat. And if Tom goes to the next slide here, it's sort of basically there's some key questions that we ask ourselves when building a week. And the first one obviously is how often can we train, right? And that's going to depend on your program, on your access. Some people may be training once a week. Some people may be training twice a week. We are very fortunate, the Free Jacks, we're a professional organization. We can choose how many times a week we train. Also in a couple of college programs that I've been involved with, we're fortunate too. We could sort of pick and choose and build an ideal training week. Excuse me. But so once we've nailed that how often can we train question, we then follow up with, okay, what do we need to achieve in this given week, right? And I guess then we start to look at what boxes do we need to tick, right? Technically, what do we need to achieve? What fine skill work do we need to achieve in order to perform on a Saturday? Tactically, what tactics do we need to cover in order to prepare on to play and perform on a Saturday? Physiologically, what do we need to do to play on a Saturday? Psychologically, what do we need to do? What situations do we need to put our players in? What experiences do we need to give them? And where do we go from there? So I guess this model sort of starts with how do we tick all these boxes as efficiently as possible to make sure that we can prepare for a Saturday. And I think answering these what do we need to achieve questions are really key in setting a week, because then it gives everything a why, right? It gives all your activities a why. So here's why we're doing this activity, because this is what we're trying to achieve. And I think the why is really, really important. Like, and I always give this early on in my coaching career, coming up to Dartmouth, and Ollie's on here, Dartmouth grad, and he knows this all too well. Ivy League institution, a lot of really, really smart young men, always a lot of why. And it was interesting. So Gavin Hickey, who's now the director of rugby down at the Naval Academy, him and I were new to the coaching scene together, and we were always getting this why. And we initially interpreted it as like, is this a challenge? What is this? What are you guys trying to do here? And it took us being the idiots and all this, took us long enough to figure out that these students were actually just legitimately intrigued by what we were trying to do and why we were doing it. And I think once we sort of got over our ego and really clearly explained the why, things started to flow quite smoothly. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think the importance of all that is, what do we need to achieve, and then how are we going to achieve that in our given sessions, right? And so I think what we've got next is basically an outline of what we built at the Free Jacks and how we tried to optimize it. And this is pretty similar to what a lot of the professional teams are running now. Obviously, the intricacies and the nuances of a lot of the activities will change, but the greater picture and the greater structure is actually pretty similar sort of across the board with professional teams. So if we want to go to the next slide there, Tommy. So basically, so you see across the top, so basically we use match day. So on the right is match day, which is Saturday, right? And that for us is the key day. That's when we really need to perform. So we take Saturday and we work backwards, right? So, and Jerry's on here, and Jerry's done a fantastic job in sort of keeping track of making sure that we prepare them from a physical standpoint, right? If you go back to ticking all those boxes, and it's sort of, we'll go backwards to go forwards. Like, we're big believers in a game-based model, right? It's like we don't have the luxury of investing significant amounts of time in strictly conditioning related activities. So that's where as a staff would sit down with Jerry and sit down with the S&C and go, okay, do these planned activities hit these metrics? And I think even just for a lot of coaches here, and in my experience is working with developing players, the game-based model is so much more effective for development, because the time, we're all limited on time, regardless of how many sessions you can have a week. Time's always sort of a limiting step. So if we can provide a model that is going to tick all those boxes simultaneously, that's so much more effective than just, okay, lads, it's Tuesday, conditioning on the line, let's go. And I mean, I was a player not so long ago, and we all know, and we've probably all been there, you put a ball in front of people and it becomes a whole lot easier to put a shift in than it is on the line. And absolutely, there's times that maybe it's sort of a little bit of stick and you get the boys on the line. But if we collectively can start to adapt a game-based model, particularly developing through players and even at the top end, I think that really helps expedite our development collectively. So that's a little bit of a tangent again. I apologise, but hopefully you're able to digest this in front of us. So Saturday, and we work backwards, right? So Friday, you see the session type, it's all about confidence, right? Friday is what do the guys need in order to perform, right? And we obviously don't want them banged up. Saturday is really, really important. So we don't do a lot of contact, right? We don't do a lot of high volume running. And Jerry can talk about this a little bit going into these next couple of slides, but it's also a good opportunity to integrate some a little bit here, am I? I'm back. Yeah, awesome.
You're back,
yeah,
James.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
So I didn't know if that was me or not.
High school. No, I'll finish this one up, Jerry, and you can jump in on that. Then, so Thursday, you work back a day, and this is based off sort of a 2-and-2 split. So train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm actually personally a big fan of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off Thursday, train Friday model. It's worked where I am for a lot of reasons, but I'm a big fan of this. But this is what we found worked really well with the Free Jacks, and sort of this is the model a lot of teams use. Is that Thursday we look at, okay, what do we need to achieve on Thursday, right? And we don't want to get too much high volume running in, because you can still be fatigued for a Saturday. So if you see, you look here, the physical is basically modified running load and high collisions, if you will. So we basically look at it as we get our running, high volume running on the Tuesday, right? And activities that involve high volume running. And then on a Thursday, the running volume's not as high, but the intensity of the activities is much higher. So this is where we'll sit down with Jared and we'll say, okay, we've got an attacking game-based activity on a Tuesday. What dimensions do you think can give us X, Y, and Z running metrics, right? And we're very, very fortunate we get to use GPS and use GPS to quantify that. But we did this, I've done this for a few years without GPS. And what the GPS did initially was basically just validate that we were on the right track, which was really, really reassuring. And then we go back to Monday, right? It's like, okay, what do we need to achieve on a Monday? And most of the time, your athletes are still pretty beat up from a Saturday's game. So you'll see the physical demand is really, really low, although the tactical demand's really high. So basically, this is our learn day and our install day. So we'll walk through activities, literally walk through them, right? So we'll get some recovery work in, but this will be a strictly walking. We'll do some fine tweaks of some of our micro skills, but very, very low intensity, very recovery focused, very learning focused, right? And that sort of sets the tone for the rest of the week. So Tuesday, we build off that, we try and execute that, run through it. And then Wednesday, it's complete recovery, right? So we don't want two back-to-back heavy days. And then Thursday is where we get after them a little bit with some shorter distances, more collision-based activities. So I hope you follow that. And this is a great graphic, and I probably haven't done it justice in explaining it, to be honest. But that's sort of the 10,000-foot view of how we got there. And Jerry, you can probably jump in and talk a little bit more about that, how we manage that volume and how you sort of plan that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, James, we do things a little bit differently from time to time, and we have worked on some of the front loading and whatnot. And in the slides to come, yeah, thank you for pushing on there. When it comes to grading exactly what we're going to be doing on the field, there's a couple metrics that we're looking at and what's going to make our athletes a lot more sore, what's going to basically turn into stress throughout the week. And a lot of it is going to be the overall meters or time on feet, so we have the opportunity, as James said, to use the GPS, and that's a great tool for us. But for coaches and teams that don't have the structure to do that, time on feet is a great metric to use. Are you training for an hour? Are you training for 2 hours? How long are your sessions stressing your athletes for? Another one that we're going to use is contact. So, we might have a heavy contact day, a light contact day, a integrated contact day where we are, monitoring our athletes and making sure they're not going full bash. And maybe we're using the pads, maybe we're using the tackling dummies and whatnot. Accelerations and decelerations are also going to be very stressful in the body. So if we're working launch plays after launch plays after launch plays the day before a game, our athletes are probably going to be pretty sore through their groin, through their hip flexors, through their hamstrings, come game day. So that's something that we also need to take into consideration. So something that I like to do, and this is a system that I've recently developed, is grading each of those metrics per session. So they could have their overall meters. Are we going to grade that for a 1, 2, or a 3? Their contacts, is that a 1, 2, or a 3? Their accelerations, is that a 1, 2, or a 3? So again, as we were talking about before, we might stretch the guys a little bit more on a Tuesday, knowing that we have the full week to recover. So we might go with a moderate, a 2 or a 3 on their accelerations, a 2 or a 3 on their meterage. But we know that, if we really don't want to stress these athletes too much and really break them earlier on in the week, probably need to keep the contact level down at maybe like a 1. And what I'm going to do again is just add those numbers together, divide by 3, and that's going to give me my score here. So that's going to give me an overall grade to the whole session. We use RPE as well, but this is a great way for us to kind of cumulatively look at the volume that we're doing throughout the week. Something that we're really thinking of when it comes to applying the stress is building the physical stress around the practice plan. So similar to what James said, they might come to me and say, hey, we're looking to get 5,000 meters today. We're going to get our heaviest running volume day in. And I might say, all right, guys, we're going to use the whole field today. But if the guys might be a little bit sore from the weekend before, we might condense that grid into it a little bit, or maybe say we're only going to go 2 or 3 phases. And that's going to give us the physiological response that we're looking to get from that. Our high intensity days should always be followed by a rest day, or, if it's going to be 2 high intensity days in a row, we definitely should follow that with a lower day or a rest day. So as James alluded to before, we might push them a little bit on a Monday and a Tuesday, and then have, Wednesday be another day as well. So we might do that learn day on Monday, where we're kind of walking through the plays and walking through, what we're looking to expect for the rest of the training week. And we might train, pretty hard on Tuesday, pretty hard on Wednesday, knowing that we have Thursday off. But again, we're not going to go full go on meterage, contacts, and accelerations and decelerations, knowing that, we need to monitor that a little bit. So even if we do have an intense training session on Tuesday and an intense training session on Wednesday we might be getting a little bit more of that intensity from a contact session. And Tuesday, we might be getting that intensity more from a high speed running metric, where we're maybe doing some kick volleying or we're doing a lot of launch plays and starter plays and getting our meterage up through there. Like I said, the use of constraints is going to help us get that desired effect. So, James does a great job with monitoring our ball and play times. If a team has a turnover, we might throw the ball back in play. We get into some things where, we're trying to manipulate the game as much as we can to almost mirror what we're going to get on Saturday. So if, last Saturday we spend most of our time with ball in hand at about 90 seconds, we're going to be looking to mimic that and, get our athletes to get adapted to that stimulus. So that's what we're going to look for when we come into the playing field and into the practice field during the week.
Cool. That's Jared.
Just to touch on that question before from Thomas, though, when it comes to the strength training, I've gone through a couple different processes with this. We're generally always going to have at least 3 lifts a week. It depends on travel. Sometimes travel gets in the way. Mondays, I find, and I've gone a couple different routes with how I go about the programming with them, and I go back and forth from doing 2 full body lifts earlier on in the week and then, more of a primer towards the end of the week. But what I find out later in the season when the athletes are a little bit more banged up, more so from the contact, less so from the physiological stress of running and their legs are tired, is what I'll do is I'll hit them with more of an upper body session and maybe a lower body prehab workout on Monday. Tuesday, I'll have them really get after the legs a little bit, knowing that they're going to hit the field and run a decent amount. So we'll really trash their legs earlier on Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll have off. Thursday will be a little bit lighter, kind of a primer day where we're moving things a bit faster. And Friday, day before the game, again, primer. Sometimes guys don't want to have much of a heavy load on that day. So I kind of make that optional. But again, it's going to be more of like a band primer or moving light weights faster to get their nervous system primed for the day after.
Cool. And then we've put together a cool little video here that sort of demonstrates what these guys have just talked about and the different days and on field what that looks like. So feel free to ask questions. James and Jared will talk it through and even like type through any observations that you make as you watch the differences in these 4 training days. It's about 3.5, 4 minutes, and I'll let Jimmy and Jerry talk through.
So this is, you can see that this is our Monday, right, which is our low intensity day. And this is where we would meet for a little bit in the morning too and give them a lot of information. So you can see right here, the lads are walking through an install of a bounce play, basically. What we'd identified against, I think this was NOLA, is that they were consistently overfolding from midfield breakdowns. So we identified a couple short side. So you've got clarity. There's a little bit of movement, so there's recovery there as well. But very slow, very, very methodical. Let's make sure we completely understand what we're trying to achieve from an on-field standpoint, so that later in the week we can execute it at full pace, basically.
And James, you can sort of see conversations even happening in amongst us, can't you? Like people saying, is this where I should be? You should be a little step over here, that sort of thing.
Yeah, questions. This is a big question and answer day, is what questions you have. And the reality is, I think we've actually been through this in film and on paper before we got to the field. So this wasn't brand new to these guys. They'd already been through it a couple of times before we got out here, but this was the first time actually walking through it and just getting clarity around roles and responsibilities. So you can see, like, that's basically the intensity of that entire session was walking speed, right? I mean, Jared talked about it. Recovery was so huge, particularly in the MLR where a lot of collisions are really, really heavy. So we want to maximize recovery to, again, optimize performance on Saturday. So, I mean, I don't know, Jerry, if you remember, I mean, we'd only get a couple of Ks tops, right, at walking speed.
Yeah, not even. I mean, these sessions were so low impact, it almost acted as like a bit of active recovery. Just a bit of to get out there, kind of decompress from the weekend a bit.
So train was our second day of the week. So you can see here we're back on field. And you can actually tell immediately that velocity is a lot higher right away. So on our train day, we did a lot of our back strike plays and line outs. So you can see here, full field, basically full speed, but no contact. You see 2-hand touch and non-contestable breakdowns, right? So basically this for us is about executing what we're trying to achieve at velocity, right? Sort of the idea is that if we can execute it above game pace, hopefully come game day, because it's slower, we should be able to nail it. And yes, there's different pressures, but you can see it's wide open, it's full field, plenty of running.
And all this stuff is predetermined on how much time we're going to spend on this based on what we think the GPS is going to give us for numbers. So, you know, if we want to get 3,000 meters out of this drill today, we know that we need to put X amount of time into it, and we'll break it up in sets and reps there.
And James, why lineouts on the Tuesday as opposed to the Thursday?
Yeah, good question, Tommy. I mean, it's sort of as Jerry alluded to, we want to sort of try and pair stimuluses. So we don't want to do a lot of scrummaging and mauling because the stimulus is similar to collision type activity. So we paired the collision day on a Thursday. So let's do our faster, more explosive, less sort of isometric, eccentric related activities on the Tuesday. And let's do our scrummaging and our mauling on the Thursday, pair that with our collisions. So that's sort of a little bit of at least the physiological why there. So this was our compete day after a day off, right? So you can see here is when we got our scrummaging work, our mauling work. Backs would do a little bit more sort of channel defense. So again, a more collision orientated session. We would have emphasis on certain elements of the game, but the reality is most activities always have an attacking and defensive element. So I don't really like calling something a defensive session or an attacking session, because if it's game-based, there's always both sides to it. But we would, to Jerry's point before, basically just use constraints to change the emphasis on what we're trying to achieve. So you can see here sort of a lot of more collisions, shorter distances. We're not moving quite as far, but we are getting more collisions in the given session. Right, and so you can actually see here, breakdowns are contestable as well. So right, the constraint has changed between the Tuesday and, okay, yes, this is wide open, but actually, if I remember rightly, the field's shorter here. So we're not even using full field, we're just using a section of the field. But the breakdowns are live, so that adds that collision element. And again, make sure as we nail a little bit of sort of contact accuracy as well. You can see there's more in the breakdowns, and it's not full smash, right? I mean, like, we've only got X number of players, and the last thing we wanted to do is a great sort of philosophical conversation, and a lot of people go a lot of different ways, but we weren't really, and are still not big fans of going full live, because it's a risk and reward, right? I mean, we've got guys who've played a lot of rugby, so it's all about preparing on Saturday. So we didn't want to smash guys up, and risk of injury is obviously really is higher. So most of our contact would be modified, and even if it was live, we'd still use tackle suits and start from much closer just to reduce the velocity of the impact. So we were really thoughtful around that area of the game.
Yeah, James, I believe this specific session we were just running about 3 phases. I don't even think we had a time clock on this one.
Yeah.
And we were just attacking that one zone.
So confidence, right? So Friday, captain's run, essentially, it's all about just confidence and clarity around roles. So the players drove most of this, and sort of Jerry did a great job. We'd give them caps and we'd say, look, like, here's what you can do. And we'd walk through the session before them, say, look, what do you guys need out of it? Okay, how do we get that without overtaxing you, but making sure you get what you need? So again, there's not a lot of contact here, but it's just about giving the guys confidence in their systems and structures, and confidence in their skill set. And actually a great little video example of that bounce play that we talked about, of the boys nailing that day before.
And this is in New Orleans, James.
Correct. Yeah, the day before NOLA.
So this week was all, it might be worth pointing out that this week was all in lead up to playing New Orleans away. So we traveled, I think we must have traveled Friday morning, then James or
Friday
Thursday
morning.
afternoon.
Yep.
And then played on Saturday, captain's run Friday evening.
Yep. This was captain's run under the lights on Friday evening, which I think we actually, if I remember rightly, Jerry, we dialed the volume back a little bit because it was a travel day too, right?
Yeah, we traveled Friday morning, and we had a tough time getting the vans. If you remember, the vans held us back a couple hours, so we kept pushing back, and then we had a gym and dinner, and then get there. So I mean, that's just a perfect example about how we always have to be kind of adjusting on the fly. So going into that session, we knew that we were gonna really tone it down a little bit and let the guys get into it, but really monitor and make sure that they weren't overstretching.
Cool. Last slide.
Yeah, cool. So I guess this is like, okay, what can you do with this, right? What can you do with this information? And chances are, I mean, most teams, I guess if you're looking at pure numbers, most teams probably train twice a week, right? On a Tuesday, Thursday, maybe 3 for a captain's run. It's like, okay, so how can you take this model and apply it to a 2-a-week training session? So I guess in its simplest form, you take our Monday and Tuesday and combine them, and then you take our Thursday and Friday and combine them together. So the sessions could be a little bit longer, but if you look at this, then you tick all those boxes you need to, right? So you get your install done, you get the opportunity to run through it, get your running volume in, sort of to make sure that you're ticking that fitness, if you will, box. You're making sure you're getting your skill work, you're getting your units work, you get a refresher in the middle, and then on your Thursday, it's an opportunity to basically get some contacts in, some, again, modified contacts for us and for a lot of people. Get your scrums, get your mauling work, and then the model you look at here is then sort of the end of that Thursday, you can provide an opportunity to your players for what do you guys need, what do you girls need, what do we need to cover in order to prepare on Saturday. So I think that's if I had to train twice a week based on what we've been doing, this is how I would split it up, is do it this way. Cool.
And Jerry, you've got some thoughts down the bottom there as to the physical aspect of that as well.
Yeah, just touching on it for some of the coaches that don't have the opportunity to have the GPS and be able to track that stuff. You can still track the stress of your players, probably through your captains and some of the older players that you might trust. Just kind of assigning RPEs to that session, asking them how hard did this session go. Was it? We were kind of touching on before earlier. The physiological stress can be manipulated by, like James said, we show that drill of the backs making contact. Just bring them in a little bit closer, especially if they're banged up. But at the end of the day, we do need to be, working those contacts. You missed 10 tackles on the weekend before, and even though the guys are banged up or the girls are banged up, that we still need to actually hit that, and we still need to emphasize that. So we can reduce the impact by bringing them a little bit closer, or we can reduce the amount of running that we do by shortening the grid, or shortening how many phases we go off of the line out or off of the set piece. So we're not really getting unwanted training volume, and we can be a bit sharper and a bit shorter and be a little bit more direct with what our goals are for that specific session.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I sort of mentioned before that I've run this model numerous times without using the GPS. And the big metric that we used was just ball and play time. So we'd just make sure the activities that we run, we'd basically time them out with a stopwatch to make sure that reflected the ball and time that we were trying to achieve. And this depends on the level and depends on a lot of things. But sort of the ball and play time we work with, at least here at Dartmouth, is we try and get it up to 40 minutes. Now I don't think we've ever had a game at 40 minutes. We sort of function around the 32 to 37 minutes per game. So we'll start early in pre-season around 30 minutes ball and play, and then basically just add roughly 15% of that per week, so that our activities, and this is predominantly on our Tuesday, on our high volume running day, is that the sum of our time and activities adds up to that ball and play time, which was a really productive way of doing it. And again, it got the guys really good at training at about 40 minutes ball and play. So when we had a game, that the game time, again, only 35 minutes ball and play, is is we could handle that running load. And we knew that we'd been training at intensities higher than the game. So I think sort of the psychological element of that was huge as well.
Cool.
Cool.
Well done. All right, we'll open it up to any questions now that anyone may have. I'll drop that down so I can see. Feel free to type through any questions you may have in regard to weekly periodization, in regards to your teams, in regard to anything they said there, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Quick question on when you say ball and play, do you mean like a passing drill? Is that considered ball and play, or are you saying it only like opposed or unopposed, like full team runs?
So the way we did it is again, sort of all of our activities, even our passing drills, are more game-based. So we'd just look at our game-based time. So when we'd still implement micro skills into that, so like a passing drill, if you will, but we'd almost build that into the recovery time. So basically we're just looking at, okay, here's the time that we've got of our activity. Let's say it's 10 on 10, 12 on 12, 15 on 15. I'm a big fan, if able, of going 15 on 15, because again, you're actually playing the game. But we'd look at basically, here's that ball and play time in our rugby related games, if that makes sense to you.
Yep.
So the total session time may be 65 minutes, 70 minutes with 34 minutes ball and play, but you may have another 10 minutes of that is your passing mechanics or another activity you may have to run depending on your needs. And I think that's probably didn't do a good enough job of stating this initially, right? It's all about like, what does your team need to achieve? How are you trying to play? What style are you trying to play? So that sort of dictates what activities you're going to use and what skills you're going to use, so on and so forth.
One for you there, Jared. Are the players on their own for recovery on Sunday, day after the game? What are the expectations, if any?
So this, I mean, for the Free Jacks, this is obviously very different than what you guys are going to have at the club level working with. The Free Jacks, it depends on where we are. If we're at home, if we're traveling, that's going to really reflect what we do with them. Generally on the road, we had a couple road trips where we were in San Diego for a week, and then we stayed there and trained for the week, and then we flew up to Seattle. So the day after the game, I made all the players go down and do a pool flush. We did band distracted recovery. Another situation, we played Seattle, and then we rushed to a flight, and we flew home, and we landed at about 5 or 6 a.m. the next day. I let those guys just completely go off on their own, recover, get some sleep, get some hydration. And obviously I gave them recommendations, and some of them did come into the gym, but I completely made that optional for them. But some recovery modalities that I'm big on, one, just hydrating. I think hydrating is the most important, and especially with, flying or, long road trips, bus trips, that kind of thing. Making sure that your players and your athletes are very hydrated is going to be the number one focus, but also making sure that they're actually doing something the next day. So a lot of people think just completely rest, don't go through anything, but even something, as simple as doing a body weight circuit, or, just doing some active recovery through some glute bridges and some body weight squats and some crawling variations and whatnot in there, that's always going to help them recover a little bit better, because it's going to get that heart rate up. It's going to help them flush out a lot of that metabolic waste that they're getting through from the game. And it's also just going to help loosen up all those tight tissues from the game. So I'm a big proponent of trying to get them up and moving the next day. But again, like we alluded to with our Monday training sessions, we're not going to push them too much. It's not going to be a lift. It's not really going to be anything crazy. It's just going to be getting them moving through some good full range of motion, having them do some mobility work, having them do ice baths if possible, having them emerge in some water if possible, because those are the things that, scientifically have proven to help reduce inflammation and speed up recovery.
Cool.
And then even from a collegiate program, we played with both. We used to do Sunday pool recovery, and then we'd do our review. So we'd do our film and basically get our review done on a Sunday, so we could start Monday fresh. But we actually found that giving them the day off completely was actually more beneficial. Again, this is one college, doesn't mean it applies to all colleges, but I think the mental refreshment was really, really big. And it made our Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday for us much more productive to basically just give them that Sunday off entirely. So I guess it depends on your population.
We've got one from OBD here. Do you base any of your plans for the following week on the team's last performance? For example, if defense wasn't ideal in your last match, do you put more of an emphasis on it the following week, or just plan for the match ahead? James, I'll let you start with that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we probably do a little bit of both, to be honest. And I guess it depends on what the work on was. So part of I guess the first thing that the Free Jacks would do on a Monday morning was the review process. So we'd sit down and we'd review the game and we'd sort of look at key takeaways. And if there were areas that we really struggled with, we'd build them into our install as well. Like if it was a technical, I guess to answer your question, it depends if it's a technical work on. And we probably address them both. If it's a tactical work on, we'd spend time in our install session getting clarity around that and go, okay, here's how we were falling short. Here's how we're going to solve it. And then we'd just add constraints into our game-based activities to try and elicit that response, if you follow that there. And then if it was technical, we would include technical work. And we're very fortunate. We've got a great facility at Flight Performance in Boston there. So we could even do technical touch-ups as part of our gym session work as well. But yes, we would include both. I guess that hopefully answers your question there.
And obviously on top of that as well, we would, I guess, do scout on the team we're about to play. So we'd go back 3 games at least and look at all their lineouts, look at all their strikes off set piece, look at their patterns of play, stuff like that. And then we'd have a presentation for the players. So like James said, it would be 20 minutes of review. They'd have a little break, and then we'd get into 20 minutes of preview as well and have a little look at what we were going to do to mitigate them performing against us and to maximize our performance against them. Cool. Any other questions before we knock off? I guess one thing while we're waiting for questions here is we've really enjoyed this opportunity, and we did kind of a full-on month of 16 coaching webinar sessions, and then these 3, and then we've offered a coaching certification course. But we're keen to hear what you guys would like to see from our end. If you'd like to get involved with our training, we've got our academy just really getting started, and we've got a lot of community-based sessions going on at the moment with our academy coaches. So we'd love for you to get stuck in there, or if you've got ideas as to what you'd like to see, feel free to reach out to us and to give us ideas. We'd love to hear them. Cool, looks like we're good there. James and Jared, thank you very much for running that and talking through, lads.
Yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. It was always, always, a great session.
Thank you, guys. It was very helpful, very informational. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you guys have any follow-up questions, obviously TK and Ollie can drop your information if you guys want to send us some direct information or direct questions. James and I are always happy to answer.
All right. Well, thanks for that, gents.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks all. Stay well.